In this video, I'm going to show you how I apply binding using the sewing machine to my quilts. This is the Hey Sweetie quilt. The binding's now cut for the quilt. If you are using normal width of fabric that's between 40 and 42 inches, then you will need to cut 6 strips of fabric for the Hey Sweetie quilt. Let me show you how I piece my binding together. So I get one piece, and then the second piece I'll pop just like that, and then I will sew diagonally across there, and then when that's sewn together it will be like so, and you just trim off the excess that you don't need. You can draw a line on your fabric if you don't just want to eyeball it. I just normally eyeball it, but if you're new to this, then get your friction pen and your small ruler and draw your line on. So I'm just going to pop my needle to the centre point, and I'm going to stitch along that line. And can you see here, now we've got the first part of our binding joined together. I'm just going to trim this excess off. And that's our first bit of binding put together. And I'm going to do that for all of the strips. So I've got all of my binding pieced together. And now I'm going to take this over to the iron, and I'm going to press this first corner over at a 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to pull that over like so. And I'm going to press all the way along for the whole of the binding. Here's my freshly pressed binding. So you can see here that I folded this corner over first, and then I've folded the binding in half, and we're now ready to start attaching it to the back of the quilt. We're now ready to sew our binding onto the back of our quilt, and this is how I do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. I've got my little tub of sewing clips here I'm going to use, and this is how we get started. So I'm just going to clip that in place. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So secure your stitches in place. And I'm going to now fold this back over, but I'm not going to start stitching right at this top edge here, because what we're going to do is when we get back round to this position, we are going to tuck the end of this binding into this little bit here. So I'm going to start about 1.5 inches down. And again, secures my stitches in place. You've got the raw edge of your binding with the raw edge of your quilt. And I'm coming up to the corner now, and I'll show you what I do to mitre the corners. I don't sew right up to the edge, so I don't sew right up to this point. I leave about 1/4 of an inch and secure my stitches in place, and then I take my needle out. I'm going to turn the quilt around. It's quite a heavy quilt, this one. And can you see now that you've got your raw edges all sewn together, so when you come to sew on the other side, it's going to look like this on the back of the quilt, which is really nice. But these corners, so we get our fabric and we're going to push that up there. And it can be a little bit fiddly for a start off, but what we want to do is make sure that we've got the binding in line with one side of the quilt and the same down the side, and then make sure that these two pieces of fabric are lined up together. So you've got that lovely 90-degree angle. And what I do is I pop a little clip in just to keep everything in place. I don't want it to move when I'm sewing down the other side. And then again, I'll start about 1/4 of an inch in, secure my stitches in place, and sew down the side as before. And I do that for every single corner. So we're coming back to where we started, and you can see here, this is the start of our binding. I'm just going to do a few more stitches and I'm going to show you what I do. So I need to cut this binding now because it's obviously too long, and I'm going to cut it at a slight angle, a little bit awkward. And I'm going to tuck that just inside there. And we've got a really nice, neat finish now to this binding. And then I'm going to sew all the way down to just past this stitch mark here. Secure my stitches. And that's how the start and the end of the binding meets. So this is the front of the quilt. I've just turned it over. You can see all your raw edges are here. Because we are machine binding, they're all going to be tucked in nice and neatly. And I always start where my join is here. So this is where your sewing clips will come in really handy. You're just going to clip those in place, tucking in all your raw edges and any threads that might be sort of sticking out. It's a bit awkward with the camera right in front of me. I'm normally a bit quicker at doing this, but that's without the camera there. I'm just going to pop another one up here. And I'll take that one out, and I'm just going to lower down my presser foot And can you see my needle is 1/4 of an inch in? I don't want that. I want to move my needle across to the left hand side, and I stitch around about here just to make sure that everything is secured inside the binding. I've secured my stitches in place, and I'm going to lengthen the stitch length to a 3. It's on 2.5 at the moment. I've just lengthened that to 3 because I think it's just a bit nicer stitch for the binding. And then I'm just going to sew all the way around the quilt. And when I get to the corner, I'll show you how we miter those corners. Now this first bit here is a little bit bumpy because we've got the overlap. And as I go along, I keep adding my clips on. If you wanted to prepare that beforehand, then you're welcome to do so. Just do whatever's comfortable for you. You can see I'm coming up to the corner now, and we want to make sure that this is lovely and mitered. But first off, I'm going to just turn this over and clip those in place, just along the bottom edge, just so it's not fighting against itself. And I'm going to carry on sewing up to the corner. And can you see here, you've got your binding going that way, and obviously this way we want it to miter over. So just make sure it's smoothed down, and I like to clip that in place. Just hold it down with your finger, and I do slow down when I get to the corner. Leave your needle down, lift your presser foot up, and gently turn your quilt around. And now we're going to start stitching along the next side of the quilt. And you do that for every corner and every side. So I'm coming up to the bottom right hand corner, and this is where I always pop my labels in. I don't know why I put it there, that's what I do. So I'm going to get my label, fold that in half, and I'm going to tuck it inside the binding. Clip it in place. I always tend to put it in the second to last square at the bottom of the quilt, so it's all tucked in nicely. I'm going to hold that in place and just sew across, and I think that's a really nice finishing touch for my quilts. You can see the bindings all in place now on our Hey Sweetie quilt, and we've got some really nice mitered corners there. If you like this video, please press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.